Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG. So full spoilers are continuing with the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and we have a new version of Vito. However, during some turn of events in the story, he turned himself into a demon as well as a vampire. He does have flying, and whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you gain 2 life if this is the first time this ability has resolved. If it's the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. If it's the third time, you create a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. So just to be honest with you guys, I wasn't too impressed with this commander, mainly at first because I felt like, okay, it's just doing another sacrifice theme. It has that ability, basically kind of like Omnath, Locus of Creation, where you have one trigger, then the next trigger will happen, then the next trigger, then it'll stop. But then after reading the card, I found this pretty interesting overall because it says sacrifice a permanent, so any kind of permanent that you have on the battlefield, whether it's a creature, that's probably the most common theme that you'll see in this deck by sacrificing creatures, but you can also sacrifice treasure and also sacrifice, for example, fetch lands. So there's a lot you could do with this deck. You could go like with a treasure or sacrifice artifact theme, or even a sacrifice enchantment theme, or you could just go with sacrificing creatures. But in this deck, I will have some treasure support, but we're going to be sacrificing creatures because there's a lot of tokens you could have enter the battlefield, especially with Vito himself. If you have read the story, Vito is all about sacrificing cards to his bat god, and basically this is what the deck aims to do. So we do have some planeswalkers that make a lot of tokens on the battlefield, like Taveshthot, Doom of Fools, Lolth Spider Queen, and Liliana Dreadhorde General. I will say personally, I like Taveshthot mainly because it's a sacrifice outlet, and on top of that, you make Thrall tokens on the battlefield for its +1 and +2 ability. And that's what I really do like about him, is the fact that you're putting creatures on the battlefield. It has the other ability to sacrifice and even draw cards. But the same can be said for Lolth Spider Queen. It has that ability of drawing cards, also making 2 bodies on the battlefield, and can have a pretty good emblem overall. And plus, whenever a creature you control dies, you put a loyalty counter on Lolth. With that, Liliana could be extra deadly in this deck because you can make tokens on the battlefield. Each player will sacrifice 2 creatures, including ourselves, and whenever a creature we control dies, we draw a card. So yeah, I do like all these planeswalkers for what they do in the deck as an aristocrat strategy. And another token generator I do want to mention to you is Denethor Ruling Steward. I really like that first ability at the beginning of your end step. If a creature died under your control this turn, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So that by itself is very powerful because, of course, we're going to be sacrificing. We might as well replenish the soldiers we do have on the battlefield. And he is a sacrifice outlet by paying 2 colorless mana to sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I feel like this is going to be a great value engine for the deck. Another value engine I do want to mention is actually 2 different enchantments that kind of function as the same thing with Bitter Blossom and Skrelv's Hive. So basically these both read at the beginning of your upkeep, you make a certain type of token and lose 1 life. For example, with Bitter Blossom, you'll make a Black Fairy token. With Skrelv's Hive, you'll make a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might creature token on the battlefield. And the longer the game does go on and you put these on early on the battlefield, the better chances you're going to be sacrificing a lot of things to drain your opponents and make bigger demon vampires. I did also briefly want to mention Kaya Geist Hunter, mainly because it's a token doubler. Kind of, it has that -2 ability until end of turn. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of tokens are created instead. So again, it's more of a temporary solution so that you can make more tokens on the battlefield with that -2 ability. Of course, if you have more loyalty, you can keep on activating that, but most likely you need to keep activating that +1 ability. But to me personally, I feel like Vito is worshipping the wrong type of god. A bat's not going to give him the tokens he needs. To be quite honest, he really should be worshipping Ozur Tak, mainly because it has that ability of tripling your creature tokens when they enter the battlefield. Interesting enough, this is the first token tripler that we've seen on a Magic card. I mean, fortunately, it's only limited to creatures, and I say fortunately because it'd be way busted if it was any token that entered the battlefield to triple it. So just creatures, we're not copying any treasure tokens that enter the battlefield, clues, or maps, just straight up creatures only. So what do we want to do with all those creature tokens? Of course, we want to sacrifice them for the almighty Bat God. For me personally, I like a lot of different sack outlets that are free. So for example, Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, or even Altar of Dementia. So technically there's a mana cost to put these on the battlefield, but what I really do mean by free is the fact that it doesn't have any activation cost by either tapping it or paying into the sacrifice outlet with a mana. With Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar, you will get mana based off of the amount of creatures you do sacrifice. With Altar of Dementia, you get to mill anybody on the battlefield. And of course in this type of deck, you want to make sure you have a lot of death triggers when you do sacrifice your creatures, having cards like Blood Artist, Aclazotz, Sadistic Pilgrim, Cruel Celebrant, and Zulaport Cutthroat. All these cards have a common theme in Aristocrat strategies. You want to be draining your opponents and gaining life whenever you sacrifice a creature. I mean, each of them have different ruling. For example, Blood Artist will trigger off of any creature dying. Aclazotz will have gaining life whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So of course in any Aristocrat strategy, these are great includes to add into the deck. But we could double the amount of death triggers we do have on the battlefield with Dreadnought, Carnage Dominus, and Teysa Karlov. They both basically have that same ability. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Teysa focuses on creature tokens, have Vigilance and Lifelink, and Dreadnought could give itself indestructible by exiling 3 cards from your graveyard. However, in this deck, I do want to talk about winning the game. There's a lot of fun and different options that you could use in this deck. So for example, I do think Bloodletter of Aclazotz is very insane in this deck. For 1, in triple black, it does have flying, and if opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that many life instead. So with this card, we could take advantage of all the Blood Artist effects and also our commander when we get to that second mode. I feel like this could be very powerful because just doubling the amount of life our opponents are going to be losing is pretty insane. Plus, I do feel like Veto works very well with Bloodchief Ascension, mainly because it has that ability at the beginning of each end step. If an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief Ascension. Also, whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. I will say that could be pretty easy to do if we're making tokens on the battlefield, and also if we're having all those Blood Artist effects on the battlefield, and with Veto too. I feel like this could be very easy to pull off. Of course, if you are gaining life and you're making your opponents lose life, you could use one of these 2 cards like Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, and Exquisite Blood. So of course, it's flavorful to have this original Veto in the deck so that you could use that as a win con. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, so there's a lot of ways we could gain life, and you could even give your creatures lifelink if you wanted to with Veto himself. Also with Exquisite Blood, it has that ability whenever opponent loses life, you gain that much life, so that's very easy to do in a 4-person game. People are going to be swinging against each other all the time, and you're just going to be gaining all that life, and of course these 2 work as a combo together to win out the game. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on this new version of Veto. I feel like this could be a pretty powerful version of Veto. I mean, I feel like it is kind of limiting having that ability, only activating it 3 times per turn. I mean, if you could get there, I feel like in most occasions you're just going to be sacrificing 1 or maybe even 2 permanents. But if you do get to that 3rd sacrifice ability, you're just going to be putting so much demons on the battlefield. I feel like this could be very powerful in that situation. Otherwise, let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Veto? I personally feel like he's pretty decent. He's not the best thing in the world, but I feel like overall he could be a pretty good Aristocrats commander. But with that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.